Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations, they teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast.
Amateurs talk about strategy, professionals talk about logistics. USMC General R.H. Barrow. Phil, what are your thoughts about this as a quote?
It's an interesting one for me to wrap my brain about it. Normally, everyone wants to talk about strategy, and you got professionals talk about logistics. I'm halfway...
Getting it on the ground, making it happen.
Yeah, I'm halfway through a book, and I can't remember the name of the book at the moment. It was put out by Harvard. It's on a general in the army, talking about the the Iraq War going back, and it's literally this: how logistics is the strategy. Mm-hmm. And they talk about how they strategies that they used to engage the troops, where in the middle of the desert they have these cheeseburgers and Coke set up. Just the troops are marching through. There just be this checkpoint station. Then in the middle of nowhere, all of a sudden they're serving cheeseburgers and Cokes because the logistics. How do you actually take day-to-day logistics and make them exciting, invigorating in whatever it is that you're doing? And so you think about that, you correlate it to your business. How do we make the process of, just the listing form, the sold form, how do you take logistics and make them exciting?
Yeah, this is interesting. Like when you go to really think about like logistics, like that's what you taught us. Like, when we were both learning our listing presentations, mate, how firm were you on trial closes, open house, auction date, photo time, bringing a buyer through? That's all logistics. And if you start thinking about like progress is logistics, because like when do we do it? What does it look like? How do we have those conversations? So we're going to talk today about mergers and acquisitions. This is a really important part. Can you tell me what's the difference between a merger and what is an acquisition?
First and foremost, most of the time when you see a merger advertised in the real estate world, that means you've got a principal that doesn't really want anyone to know they've actually sold, but they have, so you call it a merger, but it's not. But the reality is a merger is when we buy a business and the existing owner will keep shares in the business, so we are literally merging 2 companies into one under the Harris brand.
And there's some sort of benefit outside of just the financial realm that you're also picking up some skill set that's coming with that?
It definitely comes with a talent allocation as well. An acquisition is where we are literally just the full companies being acquired by us.
So it's a straight out purchase.
Correct.
So how many mergers and acquisitions do you think that you've done or been involved in now, either successful or unsuccessful?
I think we're getting close to 10 now.
Okay.
We had our previous 8 months was very busy. We've done 6, and I think we've done 6 in the last 18 months. Yeah.
Okay. And the biggest one in terms of the number of properties, is that how you'd measure it, number of properties that were bought?
Largest one in total would be about 650 managements inside that one.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about it. What are some of the lessons that stand out in your mind straight away when it comes to mergers and acquisitions?
I think it goes back to some of the previous episodes. We've actually talked about having clarity over what your model is and what the actual strategy is. So, we have some general rules around both acquisition. And by the way, so we're up for both acquisition and merger. Mm-hmm. But we probably, one of our rules these days, Josh, is that largely we're not interested in acquisitions and mergers that don't come with. There has to be an upside than just buying a rent roll. There's definitely there's a trend in the industry now where we don't see how the financial modelling is working out there at the moment, where rent roll prices are very, very overheated at the moment. And if you're just buying a standalone rent roll that comes with no additional revenue in the form of a sales team, financially, based on the churn rate of a rent roll of 15 to 20%, and based on the purchase price of what you're having to pay for it, a multiplier based on revenue, not on profitability, the numbers actually don't work in an Excel spreadsheet. Like they literally don't. If you see any reasonable accountant will just say, well, these numbers is just going to end up, it actually doesn't work. So first and foremost is, does it actually strategically align for us? And there's probably 2 ways we would go about that. Geographically, is it a marketplace we want to get into? So sometimes we might forego a little bit of profitability to get into a region where we actually want to be. One of the other key rules, which is definitely a huge part of it, is the talent acquisition that comes with it. Sometimes buying a rent roll, even if it's not a big rent roll, even if it's not a great rent roll, but it could come with a really great, either an individual or a brilliant sales team. So that would be something that would highly motivate us to actually do the acquisition. And then third is just a sales team alone. So it could be regional, it could be an individual, or it has to have a sales team attached to it. And so if it fits that criteria, and we run that through our board and through our matrix, now all of a sudden we've got the acquisitions on the table. They're kind of now we're at that point in terms of actually going ahead and getting on with it. Some other logistical things about that, Josh, is that, I would say that we have very good hygiene around the acquisition process now. So we have a very, very, and we've spoken about this a lot, we have a very, very detailed acquisition checklist that we have for our side of the fence. And then we also have a very detailed checklist that we provide to the person that we are acquiring. We learn a lot through the initial acquisitions that we've done, Josh, of things that haven't gone well. And the things that don't really go well is not understanding the emotional gymnastics that the other party is going to go through. Not just the business owner, but also the employees. And we actually went out to Ernst & Young, and we actually went and got some professional consulting services in just understanding the process of what people go through during acquisition. And it's a little bit like, Josh, kind of we're going on a little bit of a rant here, but it's a little bit like doing your list of home for sale, Josh. One of the big things that you coach is you're very big on coaching like that kind of set to sell meeting before you go to market. So hang on.
Setting of expectations.
Setting of expectations. And so in our first initial kind of acquisitions, we never used to do that. But now we actually have an expectations almost checklist that we will run through where you'll go and sit down with the other party prior, and this might be 60 days out before the acquisition actually settles, but you're now starting to engage that team to say, these are the emotions that you're now going to experience. By the way, we've already got a pre-made FAQ. I let me get my crystal ball out, guys. I can guess that these are the top 5 questions that are going through your head right now. Mm-hmm. Is my pay going to change? What's going to happen to my role? Am I going to lose my job? So here's what we're going to do. What's
going to happen to my brand?
Yeah, what's going to happen?
Do we stay in the office?
Correct. So so you want to get on the front foot. So there's those things that we have now, and it doesn't make that any of the acquisitions, and we're going through another one right now. Right, literally today we've got our team going out to another business right now here in Adelaide, of sitting down with their whole team. We've already done the face-to-face meeting with the team last week. We're now one-on-one with everybody this week, and we are attacking those exact things today. It doesn't mean that it's going to go perfect, but we are far more ahead of the curve now of the things that we know that those individuals are going to want to know before we actually move on and make it a success.
So the valuation methodology is an interesting thing, and usually that's been on top-line revenue, and it's been a multiple of that top-line revenue. Yeah. And there was an era where some of the banks in Australia were very much trying to get that on bottom-line EBITDA and multiples as to try to get it into more of a professional services firm's valuation methodology. And that was really important for the sale of really big rent rolls, because it was the movement to want to try and make them floatable on the stock exchange, buyable by a venture capitalist firm, and that has done excessively well in, for example, the UK, versus Australia. So the UK, there are businesses that have bought 800 offices in one go, and they're not franchised; they're actually a company-owned situation of 800 offices and or branches, as they like to call them. So the interesting thing about that is that systemically failed in Australia because of a lack of consistency in accounting standards. So you can't necessarily compare the pair. And
I think also the model is different though. Like the individual office holds a lot more power in Australia, right?
But also too that like the banks failed to get it across the line because there were so many people that were baked in that they had bought businesses based on top line rev, and when it came to bottom line profitability, that like those two numbers weren't the same, and so the banks weren't able to get it through, and so that's probably why we've never, respectfully, probably seen a successful float and overall growth of a residential real estate sales business or property management business in Australia that has been able to grow its share market value. So, like when you think a bit about that, it's important that the valuation methodology is probably going to be top line rev, and I think that's here to stay for the more medium to long term.
I think it's going to stay. And my take on that, Josh, interested to get your thoughts, is that if I look at the vast majority of real estate transactions that take place out there in the marketplace, be that sales or be that property management, the vast majority, as a general rule, are dominated by the franchise brand, right? So you have the large franchises that we know, you think of Ray White, Hardcore, Hookers, like that big group. Their sole revenue objective for those organisations is to keep selling real estate offices. Mm-hmm. And so the dream that is sold to everyone that opens an office is that you should build a rent roll because that's your passive wealth.
But conversely, believe it or not, some brands don't charge a franchise fee on property management.
Yeah, but they're... Yeah,
that's
right. And franchise are clipping top-line revenue. They're not clipping profitability. Yeah. So there's an invested interest in rolling out offices. Like, that's the name of the game. Get out there and roll out offices. So as long as the culture of our industry in Australia is to own an office and build a rent roll, I think that's going to underpin valuations.
Okay.
So I don't think vals are going to slide the other way.
One of the things that you did really well, and I saw, one of the more earlier forms of your acquisition document, and it was about actually having a merger and acquisition team, so an M&A team. So this is going to be the finance person, this is the marketing and brand person, this is the facilities person, this is the person who's going to work through the numbers. Here is your day-to-day contact, in terms of the person who's going to help paperwork go backwards and forwards and make those things happen. How important is it, for people to get that right? Because how many deals fall over because there's someone that's all of a sudden introduced that kills the deal? So I reckon that like accountants and solicitors are great deal killers.
Yes.
Where they slow things down because the spirit is not reflected in either the legal documentation or the spirit's not reflected when it actually comes to the financials because maybe people don't know what they're selling, and also two, they don't understand what they're asking for. So, are we just going to sign over all new managements, or are we just buying that PTY limited company?
Yes.
And there's a difference, a set of risk issues on both sides of that fence, right?
I think you're going to have a great team. You've got to know your role, and also understanding how that role or that pyramid team actually works. So maybe kind of a little brief explanation of that. A lot of the acquisitions that we do, all the acquisitions we do, by the way, they're all off-market deals. Mm-hmm. So we don't, maybe back in the early days, we maybe did one where a rent roll was advertised. Mm-hmm. But ever since that one, everything has been built over a relationship of time.
So do you remember in the early days, you were like, one of the early questions was like, do I just ring that business owner and ask? Or do I get an accountant or a solicitor to send a letter to everyone? Or do I actually employ a rent roll broker to go out there and find out who would sell to me?
Yeah.
And now you look at that and like very timid potentially in your approach about, a bit uncertain, whereas now you're much more clear.
I'm very proactive, and a lot of the deals that we did, they were actually relationships that were built 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years prior. Mm-hmm. And that conversation was very simple, which is I would literally ring people and say, look, I know that you're not a seller today, but from my perspective, I'm wanting to be doing this for the next 20 or 30 years. So I just want to reach out and say, hey, if and when the time ever comes up, I'd love to have a chat to you. Mm-hmm. And so since then, all the acquisitions that we've actually done have been people reaching out to us, say, hey, Phil, remember we spoke going back, a few years ago or whatever it might be. Would actually love to catch up and have a chat, confidential chat about how that might actually work. So that's been a really critical thing. I think if you're out there buying businesses from rent roll brokers, some of the insanity that I'm hearing in Adelaide at the moment of what people are paying with no sales teams attached to it, I think that, not arrogantly, but maybe some of the success that Harris had over the last 18 months of being so successful in buying so many businesses, I think that created a false sense of confidence in the marketplace, where I think people are assuming that it's you can't help but succeed. If you just buy a rent roll, you just make money.
And the right rent roll broker actually does help the seller to prepare to sell. And I know that sounds funny, but there are some people that have not yet gone through that journey, and the amount of education and conversations you've got to have to get them actually able to sell is madness if you're a buyer going in on that. On some of these businesses that have got dysfunction, but that's been able to grow over many years.
And you and I were only speaking offline where we went and took a quick coffee break before about some businesses that have grown to like they've just gone at that. All they've done is just acquired. No organic growth strategy, no great retention of great people. The portfolio was shrunk from like 4,000 or 5,000 down to 1,000. I mean, that is catastrophic on the balance sheet. So, but back to the question about the acquisition team, the flow of how it works inside our organisation. My role really is about I'm the brand ambassador of Harris, so I hold the strategic relationship with the person who might be thinking of selling their business. So my job is just to get that to the table of actually winning the relationship. And I'm very much not about numbers and facts and figures. That's not my role at all. I just want to get it to a position where they feel comfortable and there is a level of trust that they actually want when it's now no longer about, are they selling it to us? It's an agreement of they want to do the deal with us. Now we just actually got to agree on what those numbers and figures are. And so at that point, that's when I would hand it over to our acquisition team, like the financial team, who would now, okay, let's actually analyse the portfolio. Let's actually see the money that they're asking for it, what it's worth, what we're prepared to pay. We have a very strict kind of financial budgeting system between our CEO, our CFO, and our accountant, who would run some details on that. And then after that, it goes to the acquisition team to act for the actual handover. And one of the key things we learned through our work with Ernst & Young was just in relation to that acquisition team, you can have a massive team of people who are doing the grunt work behind the scenes, but you want to limit the number of people that company has to deal with down to just one or two key people. So even though you might at Harris have a marketing department, a sales department, an admin department, a PM, you want to have like one or two kind of point guards at that office that all of the new staff are just going to one person to ask their questions. Does that make sense?
Of course it does.
We just want to make it so simple for people to find out what they need.
Did you ever watch Thomas the Tank Engine?
I would have at some point, yes.
So there was a job role in there. It was called the Fat Controller, and the Fat Controller is the one that directed all the traffic.
Yes.
And we talk about that term quite a lot in our business where we go, okay, great, on this particular thing, who's going to be the Fat Controller? In other words, like that's the one central person who's going to control all of the issues that are going to come up in around that particular thing. And that's a really important thing to get workflow right, so that you can understand that. I'm not sure it's probably the politically correct term these days, but the concept's actually
I like political incorrectness.
Yes. So when you think about this, a couple of little things as we finish today, what does the sale actually represent for the seller? Is it the end of a career, end of a lifetime? Is there legacy? Are there conversations and things that you've got to unpack? And one of the great tools that, we have used is the T intersection, where on one side of the T intersection you go, what do we agree on? On the right-hand side, what do we need to work on? So we might be able to agree on a whole range of things, but maybe there's some things that we need to work on, like, payment, for example, of workplace entitlements, or conversation around an existing lease that's in place, or a franchise agreement that's in place. So we need to work on those things, and we have not yet got to agreement, but yet the core. And just be really careful you don't get caught up on something like brand, as an example, when, like, if you can agree on everything else, that is actually like a completely, like, very distant, conversation. And then also too, what does it look like for people during the transaction and after the transaction? Because you don't want people to take their foot off the accelerator, because if the transaction doesn't go well and it backs out, then all of a sudden people are really bitter that they took their foot off the accelerator in their business over the course of that 6 or 12 month time frame and didn't keep actually driving it. And then, what does it take to make this look like a wild success? And I think that, probably one of the best people in this space for a decade and so is the current chairman of Jealous Craig in Nick Dowling. He came from a financial banking services background, but was very, very clear about, like, the core promise. And I think that, you and I both benefited from some mentor sessions with him where he'd say, hey, what does it take for us to become the number one in every single one of our chosen markets? And often it would be having an office that was in the third or fourth position in that marketplace and getting them to acquire the third or the second office in that marketplace and merge with them to make it the number one inside of that marketplace, and really structuring businesses of size and scale that could actually benefit from the opportunities of what an M&A would bring together. Principle, you got to fix your fixed costs first. Phil, what are your thoughts about this? And obviously it relates a lot to the mergers and acquisition space, to making sure that businesses actually understand what their fixed costs are and how to get that revenue to meet them.
I think if you fix your fixed costs and you have a better understanding of your business and you're running a highly profitable business over a sustained period of time, the only reason, Josh, and how that relates to acquisitions, the only reason that Harris has been able to be so successful with those, half a dozen acquisitions over the last 18 months, it was the 13 years leading up to that we didn't always have great years, right? But we had some really, really good years. And it was at those times that we were sensible. We put money away. We paid down debt. We've never had directors who were obsessed with taking money out of the business. It was like, no, we all earn good salaries and we all sell how we're all doing well. Keep your money inside your business, reduce your debt, and we got ourselves into a position where we were able to go out there and leverage and buy businesses because we had the balance sheet power to be able to do it. So it's what we did in the 13 years prior that allowed us to be in a position to actually acquire.
Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
On Dream Big,
Move Fast.